Have you ever caught yourself speaking out loud when no one else was there? Not shouting, not raving, just softly. A whispered sentence while washing your face, a half-finished thought thrown at the mirror. You instantly bury it because you think you're just lonely. But neuroscience suggests something far more haunting. When emotional isolation hits a critical threshold, your brain's social network panic snaps. It refuses to let you exist in a vacuum. So it splits. It duplicates your consciousness, launching a biological simulation of another human being inside your skull, just to keep you sane. You aren't talking to yourself. You are living with a ghost your survival instinct manufactured. The world is so quick to label this as instability. They tell you it's proof that something deep inside your mind has finally broken. So you tuck the moment away like a shameful secret, completely unaware of the evolutionary rebellion happening in your chest. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans survived by thinking out loud, narrating hunts, tracking predators, anchoring reality through sound. The hyper-silent mind is actually a brutal, unnatural invention of the modern industrial world, designed to turn human beings into quiet, compliant cogs. When you speak to an empty room, you aren't slipping into madness. You are staging a coup. Your evolutionary DNA is violently rejecting the artificial silence of a civilization that demands you suffer without making a sound. Look closely in the mirror. The voice you're speaking to isn't a stranger. It's your mind, frantically trying to run a diagnostic on itself. This internal monologue is actually a localized ecosystem of fractures, an organic AI trying to balance your nervous system when reality gets too sharp to touch. There is the narrator, desperate to log your daily movements just to prove you haven't vanished. There is the shadow voice, holding your unspoken anger, your unhealed grief, your deepest self-loathing. And then there is the inner parent, frantically trying to soothe you, or viciously scolding you before someone else can do it first. These aren't separate personalities. They are the shattered pieces of a single consciousness that had to compartmentalize just to survive the weight of unshared trauma. To understand why this internal duplication feels so instinctive, we have to look at how your brain originally learned to map reality. Watch a child playing alone. They narrate every movement, voicing every tiny, imagined conflict. Developmental psychology shows us that children must externalize thought, through sound, before they can internalize emotion. The voice is a physical bridge, a desperate attempt to translate a terrifyingly massive reality into a shape they can control. When life gets too loud, the spoken word becomes a tiny anchor. It's okay. We're safe. Just hold on. The voice outside is training the soul inside. You used to do this too, before the world weaponized silence against you. But for many, that training ground was completely abandoned. You grew up with parents who were physically there but emotionally dead, eyes that looked right through you, homes where love was a moving target, and affection depended entirely on your performance. You learned early that your real feelings were a threat to the fragile peace of the house, forcing you to grow up before your heart was ready. So you stopped playing and started simulating. When no one asked how your day was, the voice did. When disappointment cracked your chest, the voice stitched it back together. Cold sweat, heavy silence. I'm right here. Your internal dialogue was born not as a symptom of weakness, but as a brilliant, tragic act of self-preservation. But there is a dangerous psychological trap waiting in this sanctuary. As the years pass, the voice doesn't just record your memories, it begins to distort them. Every single time you talk to yourself to process a past heartbreak or replay an old argument, your brain subtly rewrites the script. The neuroplasticity of your mind means that the more you ruminate on your wounds in isolation, the deeper those agonizing grooves become. The voice you think is your protector slowly transforms into an invisible architect, quietly building a mental prison out of amplified regrets and hyperinflated fears. You think you are healing the past, but you are actually manufacturing a darker version of it. Over time, this psychological loop alters how you love. When your brain's social simulation becomes too efficient, other human beings begin to feel unnecessary, or worse, unsafe. You stop trying to explain your pain to your partner or friends because the voice in your head already perfectly understands. You withdraw behind walls made of your own acoustic echoes, mistaking the safety of isolation for actual intimacy. Attachment theory tells us that deep psychological security can only be forged when we are seen and soothed by another human being. But if you rely entirely on your internal duplicate for love, you are trying to drink from a mirror. The voice becomes both a miracle and a wound, proof of your survival, and the very thing keeping you isolated. The tragedy is that society has conditioned us to worship this emotional isolation as strength. We live in a culture that praises constant visibility and the flawless display of an adjusted life, while simultaneously fearing the quiet, introspective mind. You are trained to choke back your unfiltered thoughts, smoothing over your internal bleeding with socially acceptable smiles. Identity has become a curated performance. People don't actually fear your self-talk. They fear the raw, dangerous honesty behind it. It reveals an inner world that cannot be bought, sold, or managed by external expectations. They label you as weak or lonely simply to keep your reality at a safe distance from their own buried demons. But look back through history. The inward voice has always been considered sacred before modern distraction commodified our attention. Philosophers under ancient skies, poets whispering lines into the dark until meaning appeared, scientists talking themselves through the edge of discovery. They all understood that the deepest human transformations require a dialogue with the self. They weren't running from madness. They were actively stepping into the abyss to find alignment. When you reject the constant noise of modern consumption and speak into the quiet, you are reclaiming the single most important relationship of your entire existence. You are demanding to be heard by the only person who has been there since your very first breath. Healing does not mean silencing this inner companion. It means changing your relationship with the simulator. It requires you to stop treating your internal monologue as a pathology and start reading it as a map. The next time you whisper to yourself in the dark, pause. Listen. Not with panic, but with intense, clinical curiosity. Ask yourself, which fracture is driving the simulation right now? Is it the child who was left alone in the cold? The adult who is utterly exhausted from pretending to be strong? The voice isn't random noise. It is unexpressed trauma shaped into language. This is where inner reparenting begins. When the fear rises and the voice trembles, you must step in as the conscious guide. When the doubt sharpens into self-criticism, respond with absolute, unshakable steadiness. I am trying. When the loneliness echoes through your thoughts, remind the system, I am right here with you. This isn't a delusion. This is radical self-compassion. It is the emotional oxygen mask you were never handed. By moving your thoughts from the abstract chaos of your mind onto a physical page, or speaking them with conscious intent, you stop drowning in the feeling. You map the terrain. The voice stops being a chaotic war zone and finally becomes a sanctuary. Your inner voice has never been your enemy. It is the single part of your soul that refused to disappear, even when life tried its hardest to erase you. It has lived through every suffocating silence you endured, every time you swallowed your tears to keep the peace, every night you cried into your pillow so no one would hear your distress. It witnessed the quiet heartbreaks that left no visible bruises, but fundamentally changed your DNA. Through all of it, it stayed. It kept you company in the places no one else was brave enough to enter. It is a living archive of your absolute endurance. So the next time you find yourself whispering in an empty room, do not rush to choke the words down. Do not call yourself crazy. Do not feel ashamed. Listen. Really listen. You are hearing the raw, unfiltered truth of your own survival. If you speak to yourself, it's because a part of you is still fighting to be seen, because a part of you is still actively healing, because a part of you remembers exactly what it felt like to be completely invisible and refuses to let that be how your story ends. There is nothing unstable about that. In fact, it is the most profoundly human thing you can do. You have been your own witness, your own comfort, your own home. You aren't talking to yourself. You are finally returning to yourself.